video in our Optimize Your Point of Sale video series, where we teach you how to program your bar's point of sale to capture more profits at your bar. So in this video, we're going to go through some practical implementation recommendations here. We're going to look at the different portion sizes you'll need to agree. We're going to think about confirming your product selection and the subcategories you might use in case you are planning out screens and need to plan those. We are going to talk through two options for using some best practices and naming conventions, so things are intuitive to both your bartenders and know what to make, your customers so they fairly understand what they're being charged for, but also for tracking with your inventory system. And we'll talk about more about that in the final video. We're going to talk about the opposite way, or our suggestion for signature drinks, which kind of flips where you bring up signature drinks on its head. Think about planning out the layout of your screens in your point of sale system, and then finish up just by talking about how we're going to train our staff. So let me share my screen here. We've just got a basic Google Doc here with some visual sort of aids to help me explain this, and then we'll provide a link to you in case you wish to download this for reference. So here we are looking at portion sizes. We discussed these in the previous videos, but here is a more exhaustive list. At your bar, you need to decide what you're going to do for singles, shots, rocks and neat pours, doubles, martinis and old fashioned. Don't have to be the same, but it's sensible to agree them as the same size where you can, because then, same as the double, because then you don't have to have a separate set of buckets. Also talk about 2-ingredient recipes like White Russian to think about if you're serving full shots or half a shot each, or an ounce and an ounce. What you do for things like shooters, if those are popular. So like if you have a green tea shot, which contains Jameson and peach schnapps, have you explicitly decided how much of those two ingredients are used? And similarly on bombs, talk about the exact portion sizes. For instance, how much, if you're using Red Bull, of a can of Red Bull are you using? Just to run through those and talk about from our experience. For singles, as we talked about before, the most common is 1.5. We also see bars doing 1.25, sometimes 1 in a corporate setting, and some high-end places with 2. For shots, I kind of like it when bars have 1-ounce shot glasses, so they can price them more aggressively and try and build ticket averages by selling more shots. But a simple way to do it is have them the same size as your singles, so you use the same button. Probably depends how much your bars serve shots. For rocks and neats, many bars have a different pour size, something like 2 ounces. Some bars will say it's not worth the complexity and the number of those we sell. We should just offer to customers to have singles or doubles. So if they want more, they pay for a double. And you can perhaps soften the blow of that by some bars don't charge twice as much for a double. The extra shot will cost 75% the original shot, or even half if they're wanting to promote doubles as a way, again, of building check averages. Doubles, some people do sneaky doubles, but by far the most common is to simply obviously double what your single pour is. Suggest doing the same for your martinis and old-fashioned style drinks, and then think about what you do with these other examples. Moving on now to subcategories. Obviously, if you already have an existing point of sale system, you have this already set up, and so not much. This is what we use in our software, just breaking down for beers the different categories, just as an example in case it's helpful for liquor. And the same for wine. Our clients in general are not high-end 5-star restaurants with huge wine lists, and so this is a good subcategory delineation for most bars. Of course, if you are a fancy restaurant with a wine list of a few hundred labels, you're going to need to break down by varietal or New World, Old World, that type of thing. But just a point of reference in case that's helpful for new bars that are looking to decide what screens they have. On naming conventions, I wanted to just give 2 suggestions here for you. So we're using the example of Well Vodka here. And as I said, most bars do a good job about making the bartender know what they need to make. But we also want to think about communicating to the customer when the check prints why they're paying extra for more drinks, so they don't think, I just got charged $14 for a Tito's, and we need to know that the reason for that is they're drinking a double. And also, if you are going to seize on the opportunity of inventory, this element of setting up the point of sale is a big part of this, but as we'll talk about in the final video, the final piece is comparing what you're ringing in the point of sale with what your bartenders are pouring. And in order to do that, you need to have a precise record of what you sold, which is what we're doing here about setting the point of sale system up correctly. But you also need to make sure that when you run an aggregated report for the whole week, it is obvious what the portion size is for each button. And so that beefing up your labeling and using some naming conventions here helps you with that element. And that's often where the biggest gain is in terms of using point of sale programming to make more money at your bar. So 2 examples here. The top example is, of course, you already have button descriptions, but it's one thought here is that you can just simply list the number of ounces that are served. So in this case here, we've got a single button, it's 1.5, a shot button, which is 1.0, or could be 1.25, depending on the size of the shot glass, a rocks or neat pour, that's 2.0, and then a double or martini pour, which is 3.0. If you find that a bit cryptic and people are going to wonder what's 2.0, 3.0, another way to do it is to add descriptions like SNG for single, obviously shot, rocks for rocks or neat, and then DBL, MRTI for martini. Either way, it increases the visibility for customers and bartenders, and also decreases the possibility of, when you're trying to calculate your sales, of miscalculating how much has been served. Moving on here to signature drinks. So the typical way you ring up a signature drink is you have a signature drink sub-menu and you just press House Mule. The problem, as we discussed, is these days a lot of customers expect to be able to modify their signature drinks and sub in a new base spirit. And so we kind of typically like to flip this on its head. Once you set up a button for all the different sizes you offer at your bar, you now have the ability to ring up any liquor drink in any size. And we would always suggest what we call the mother button. The button you press first is the actual liquor which is going to be used in the signature drink. So if your House Mule contains Tito's, you ring up Tito's 1.5, and then you use a modifier that's Maker's Mule. And so the Tito's 1.5 might charge $8. The Make as Mule button or modifier might add like $3 for the ginger beer and lime juice and copper cup. And the advantage of doing it like this is that then you can easily sub in if a customer wants Grey Goose. You ring up Grey Goose as the mother button, and then it will charge maybe $11 or whatever the price is for Grey Goose, and then it will charge the additional. So it gives the ability to track and to modify those and still track exact amounts, because you're still ringing up the base spirit. Similarly, if you're ringing up, say, a Manhattan, you would start by ringing up a Bullet Rye double or 3.0 button, and then simply modify as Manhattan, so that in that case, Manhattan modifier always means the exact same thing in terms of added cherry and other ingredients to your signature cocktails. Also using example here of a House Marg, perhaps ringing up with Espolon, 1.5 ounces, and then, often a House Marg would include a less expensive triple sec. And then you might have something like a Cadillac Marg, which by default might be made with, let's say, Patron. And then that would, the modifier Cadillac Marg would add cost, and it might include, for instance, instead of using triple sec, using a fancier triple sec style liquor like Grand Gala, and or having a half-ounce GM float would be a common one there. And then wanting to finally address one final piece here, which is, if you follow our naming conventions here and you create one drink, one button style, where each different liquor for the different size has its own button, you run into a problem where you've got a lot more buttons. Even if you only do singles and doubles, you're going to have twice as many liquor buttons. And so I wanted to show you here a trick that we have learned, that normally you can speak with your point of sale system programmers and have them set this up. So the idea is, you would typically have your standard subcategory buttons like gin, vodka, rum, whiskey, tequila. And when you land on and you hit that screen, or in this case, the vodka screen, you'll land and here are your vodka buttons arranged here on a grid. And so if you wish to ring up a single of Tito's, you just press vodka screen first and then hit this Tito's button. And then what we don't want to have is have a separate subcategory screen for vodka singles, vodka shots, vodka rocks, vodka doubles. And so what we do is we nest these category toggles inside the vodka screen. So if you need to ring up a vodka shot, you would press the vodka screen. You would come to this layout here, And because you're not going to serve a single with 1.5 ounce, you would hit the shot toggle, which would make the screen switch to this version. And as you see, the layout of the shot screen is the exact same with the different liquors laid out in the same order, but you'll notice that then the buttons have changed to 1.0 versions. And so in this way, you have the ability to have, let's say, 4 different sizes, and yet you only have one subcategory button for vodka, and inside that subcategory vodka button or screen, you have the ability to toggle between the different sizes. And by laying out the buttons in the same order, it means that you can have quick point of sale ring ups and still differentiate different sizes and be able to charge and track your sales appropriately. Once you've decided all that, time to set aside some time. Find the time to program the point of sale, make updates, ideally do this on a schedule, and then of course hold a staff meeting to train your staff how they're going to use the new system to ring up drinks appropriately. And a final word on that is, it's always a good idea to have a bar log behind the bar where if the staff does not know how to ring a particular drink, they can do their best at the moment, and then they can write down a note of, I couldn't ring up this drink, or I didn't know how to ring this up. And then that bar log can become your kind of cheat sheet about what changes you need to make to your point of sale programming. There is always questions and differences of opinion, etc. And you're often coordinating maybe 15 different servers. And so creating that communication loop where they know, hey, if you have a problem with this, write it down so we can read those notes and then follow through in making updates, communicate those back. That's an important part of managing this, because obviously it's not just about how you set up your point of sale, it's also how we get our staff to use that so we can charge and explain to our customers. Hope that's helpful. Look out for our final video where we'll talk about some implementation and follow-up considerations. And as always, thanks for watching.